Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to teach you how to hit the high two-handed backhand. So let's start with timing. There are going to be 3 ways to time the ball when it comes high to your backhand side. You can take the ball while it's rising, you can take it at the apex, or you can take it when it's falling down from the apex. So let's start with taking the ball early. What a lot of people are encouraged to do is take the ball extremely early, maybe off the bounce even. And what you have to understand is when you get a high ball coming your way, that ball is going to have a very steep flight path. So if you try to take the ball extremely early, there's a big chance that you're going to frame the ball or mishit it. So that's not the only reason why you shouldn't take a high ball off the bounce. It's also going to be very difficult to involve your body because you're going to have to stay low, and generally those type of shots are more half volley like, and the strokes are reduced. So you're not going to be able to take a full swing if you take the ball extremely early. And generally, the earlier you take the ball, the more clean your footwork and your racket skills have to be. So in other words, you have to move very quickly and very accurately, and you have to have good hands in order to take any ball in tennis early, but especially the high ball, because again, the trajectory is very tricky on a high ball, especially if that high ball has spin on it. So you're going to gain a lot of advantages from taking the ball early, however, letting the ball come up. Now, if the high ball is not that high and the apex is somewhere around here, you can wait for the ball to get to the apex. Now, of course, you can also wait for the ball to come down from the apex, and this is something that the ball might require you to do. Maybe you didn't set up quickly enough and the ball is putting you in a defensive position. It's going to be very difficult to take the ball early. You're going to have to wait for the ball to come down from the apex. And your contact point will differ. It's not going to be the same on every one, but if you want to speak in general terms, anywhere between your lower chest area and the very top of your head is going to be a comfortable strike zone for your high two-handed backhand. When you start making contact above your head, this is where that high two-handed backhand starts feeling extremely uncomfortable. So under no circumstance should you ever take the ball above your head. And this leads me to talk about footwork, because what a lot of people do when they get a high ball directed to them, they don't move their feet and they stand there. Maybe they're underestimating the ball because it's slow, but now they're at the ball's mercy, and often contact is established way above the player's head. So now let's talk about footwork, and this is one of the most important elements of mastering a high backhand. You want to keep your body at all times behind the ball. When that ball gets behind you, now you are in a big trouble regarding any backhand, but especially the high one. Because let's say somebody pushes you wide and deep with a high topspin ball, and you're catching that ball late and you're making contact behind and up high, there's going to be very little that you can do with a ball like that. It will require incredible strength to be able to turn this type of contact into something valuable. But the thing about tennis is that sometimes we are forced into these situations. So what you want to keep in mind is that when that ball gets to the side of you, when it's pushing you laterally and it's high, these type of high backhands you want to execute in an open stance setup. So you're going to be hitting these off your non-dominant foot. A lot of players feel weakness hitting two-handed backhands off their non-dominant foot, so it's of the utmost importance to keep yourself fit and keep your legs strong and also your core, because your strength in your legs and your core will show on shots like that when you're hitting the ball more behind, when you're playing the ball higher and you're playing it off your non-dominant leg. If you put in a lot of work off the court, you're going to be able to turn these type of shots into neutralizing ones, or maybe even into aggressive ones where you're turning defense into offense. So the ideal scenario you want to find yourself in regarding the high backhand is to keep your body behind the ball, because here you are going to be able to play it in a closed stance situation. This is the more natural setup on a two-handed backhand. You're going to be able to rotate more and make contact more in front, and this is going to result in more effortless power. Now, this part of the lesson is super important because I'm going to show you the right biomechanics on the high two-handed backhand. If you don't get this right, you're going to continue to struggle. So let's talk about racket head angle first. If you make contact at your waist, for example, your racket head is going to be in line with the handle. Naturally, when you make contact higher, the racket head needs to be above the level of the handle. Some players will raise their hands on a high backhand and keep the level of the racket head and the handle the same on all their backhands. So if you hit your high two-handed backhand with your hands up here, you're not going to feel any strength. So what you must do is keep your hands lower and get the racket head way above the level of your handle. Now, when it comes to your swing path, the good news is that you're going to keep everything the same. You are going to finish your two-handed backhand like you always do. You're going to try to hit yourself in your shoulder blades. You're going to get your elbows up and you're going to fully rotate. But you're going to do something that's quite unique for this specific shot. So if you watch some of my previous two-handed backhand lessons, you know that I teach the dip. So what the dip is a proper loading position on the two-hander where you're bending your knees and you're also slightly dipping your front shoulder, which creates a slight tilt that is then reversed as the player starts going towards the contact. So under no circumstance should you try to tilt on a high ball. It doesn't make any sense because we need to keep the shoulders more upright in order to be more comfortable when making that higher contact and getting the racket head to be higher. So you're going to keep your shoulders level and you're going to try to lean into the ball in the forward phase of your two-hander. So it's basically a reversal of the shoulder positions. It's somewhat of a cartwheel similar to the service motion. We're going to start level with the shoulders, and in the forward phase we're going to start to bring the non-dominant shoulder above the dominant shoulder. And what this feels like, it feels like you're leaning into that high backhand. Now, something super interesting happens to the swing path. Remember, I told you to keep your swing path the same. You're going to go low to high. You're going to finish where you always have. But because your racket head is higher, you are swinging up, but the entire system is going down, which levels out the swing path and makes it more horizontal. Because if we're talking about hitting high two-handed backhands deep in the court, you want to hit them with a horizontal swing path. The gravity will pull that ball down if you hit it cleanly. And this is independent of your level, of your height. Now, if we get closer into the court, this is where we're going to see more variation, and body height and proximity to the net is going to matter a lot more. And there are some examples where you can swing down on the ball if you properly position yourself. However, the type of high two-handed backhand that I'm talking about is the more defensive one. And here, it is going to be safe to attempt to have a normal swing path, but most importantly, lean into that shot to level out the swing path. But not only that, you adding an additional power source to a super weak shot. So if you position yourself properly and are able to make contact in front, you're going to be able to rotate into that high backhand. But it's not only that, you also get forward momentum. So you are adding a power source to your backhand. You are rotating into the backhand and also going forward at the same time. What you will feel if you do this right is that that back leg is going to kick up and is going to swing around once you get to the finish. Now, how about the jumping two-handed backhand? You see this from players like Marcelo Rios and Marat Safin in the past, but also one-handed backhand players, and many two-handed backhand players will often jump into their two-handed backhands. So this is something that you see mostly in offensive situations. And even there, this is something that's going to be very difficult to execute. But the important thing that you need to consider is that the lifting off the ground shouldn't be initiated prior to your stroke. That's basically a jumping shot. If you happen to leave the ground because you have violently accelerated upwards and you end up getting airborne, or if you're playing a more defensive backhand where the ball gets more behind you and you're doing open stance, and this violent upwards acceleration lifts you off the ground. And that's perfectly fine, and that's actually what's supposed to happen if you hit your shot correctly. But my advice is to stay away from jumping backhands, and I'm going to dedicate that topic to another video. Now let me close this video off with something that a lot of players do across all levels, which is basically getting a high ball to the backhand and then sending a high ball back. And it's perfectly fine to put some air on your backhand. And what happens to a lot of players that utilize this tactic is they actually let the ball come down to their normal strike zone between the chest and the waist. And because there's so much backwards momentum, they're usually falling backwards and then swinging up. Naturally, that ball tends to sail a little bit. And look, if you're trapped in a situation where you have to hit the ball low and you're way far back in the court close to the fence, you might have to hit that shot. But your intention should be not to play from the back fence, and ideally take the ball while it's still rising, or take it at the apex, or take it while it's slightly fallen to your chest level. If you're quick enough with your feet and utilize the technique that I taught you today, you're going to be able to hit your high two-handed backhand more consistently and also more aggressively.